In this video, we'll be learning how to render files and effects and why rendering is so important as you edit your Premiere Pro project. So let's get started. First of all, what is rendering? Rendering takes all of your video and audio files, along with all your video and audio effects, and turns them into one smooth file. Why is this important? This is important because oftentimes you'll find yourself pressing play and realizing the video is lagging, sometimes to the point where it's almost impossible to view your video. Just like trying to watch a video with bad Wi-Fi, your Premiere Pro videos resemble the same problem when more and more files and effects are added to the timeline. So now that we know why rendering is so important, let's go ahead and learn how to render your project files. Every person and project is different in terms of deciding when you want to render your files. It all depends. There may be times when you only need to render your files once. There may be other times when you need to render your project files multiple times. I usually render mine when the files become slow enough that it gets in the way of editing the rest of my project. Now onto a step-by-step tutorial of how to render your files in Premiere Pro. I've already imported multiple files into my project and onto my timeline. Now let's say I'm having a difficult time previewing my files because of the amount of work I've done with my project already. This is when I want to render my files. Just in case, I usually click my timeline box so Premiere Pro knows what it's rendering. Then you can click Sequence towards the top left-hand side of your screen. Here, you have 6 different rendering options. Render effects into out, render into out, render selection, render audio, delete render files, and delete render files into out. I'll go through each one and tell you what they mean. Render effects into out is for rendering all of the effects in your timeline from beginning to end. Render into out is for rendering every file and effect in your timeline. Render selection is for rendering the individual files you've selected. Render audio is for rendering only your audio. Delete render files is for deleting only the selected render files in your timeline. And delete render files into out is for deleting all of the render files and effects in your project. Usually I tend to pick the render into out because I like to preview my Premiere Pro video multiple times to make sure everything looks good before exporting the video. But it's up to you. You can go ahead and render your project. But be aware that rendering can sometimes take a while. It depends on how much you have to render. This will also determine how many times you end up rendering because of the amount of time it sometimes takes. Once it's done rendering, you can play your video without it buffering or lagging behind. And that's how you render your files. In this video, we've learned how to render files and effects, and why rendering is so important as you edit your Premiere Pro project. Thanks for watching.